The conference room buzzed with tension as the CEO, a tall man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair, slammed his fist against the polished mahogany table. Across from him sat Alina, her usually composed demeanor cracking under the weight of his accusations. Papers scattered across the table, and the air seemed thick enough to cut with a knife. Nepotism. Alina's voice trembled, though she tried to maintain her composure. You're firing me because you think I got my position through family connections? That's exactly why, the CEO snapped, his face flushed with anger. We found out about your cousin working in procurement. The board's decision is final. Alina's mind raced, trying to process the absurdity of the situation. Her cousin? The one who worked in procurement? They hadn't even spoken in months. She opened her mouth to protest, but the CEO cut her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. Pack your things by noon. Security will escort you out. His voice carried the finality of a death sentence. As Alina gathered her belongings, her hands shook with a mixture of anger and disbelief. 3 years of dedicated work, countless late nights, and groundbreaking contributions, all dismissed in a single morning meeting. The whispers of her colleagues followed her like shadows as she made her way to her office for the last time. Her workstation told the story of her tenure, stacks of technical journals, whiteboards covered in complex algorithms, and a small potted plant that had somehow survived her long hours. Each item she packed felt like a piece of her professional soul being torn away. When security arrived, their presence felt surreal, like characters from someone else's nightmare walking into her reality. As they escorted her through the glass doors she'd walked through thousands of times, Alina caught sight of her reflection. For the first time in years, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. The confident engineer who had revolutionized their data processing systems seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone smaller, diminished. The drive home blurred into a haze of red lights and unshed tears. Pulling into her driveway, Alina realized she couldn't face her empty apartment just yet. Instead, she found herself at the small cafe around the corner, where she'd spent many early mornings preparing for important presentations. The familiar aroma of freshly ground coffee provided little comfort as she settled into her usual corner seat. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from colleagues, some offering sympathy, others asking for details about her projects. Each notification felt like salt on an open wound. How could they not see how much she had sacrificed for that company? The algorithm she developed had reduced processing times by 40%. The security protocol she designed had prevented multiple potential breaches. And now, all that work was being attributed to mere favoritism? A young barista approached, concern etched on his face. Ms. Alina, are you okay? His voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. She forced a smile and nodded, though her eyes betrayed her turmoil. The cafe had become her sanctuary during stressful project deadlines, and apparently, word traveled fast even here. Hours passed as Alina sat there, watching the world move on outside the window while her own world had seemingly imploded. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across her table. Her mind kept returning to the irony of the situation. She'd always been wary of drawing attention to her personal life at work, knowing how easily perceptions could be twisted. Now, her caution had been turned against her. The weight of her termination began to settle more heavily with each passing moment. It wasn't just about losing a job. It was about having her professional identity stripped away. The projects she'd poured her heart into would continue without her. New team members would take credit for her innovations. The thought made her physically ill. As evening approached, Alina finally mustered the strength to leave the cafe. The walk home felt endless, each step heavier than the last. When she reached her apartment building, she paused in the lobby, staring at her reflection in the elevator doors. The woman looking back at her seemed both familiar and foreign, a stranger wearing her face. Inside her apartment, silence pressed against her ears. Normally filled with the hum of her computers and the soft glow of multiple monitors, the space now felt cavernous and cold. She wandered from room to room, touching familiar objects like a ghost revisiting its former life. In her home office, the whiteboard still displayed equations and notes from her last major project, the one that had supposedly been compromised by nepotism. Sinking into her desk chair, Alina stared at the board, her mind racing through memories of late-night coding sessions and breakthrough moments. Each equation represented not just technical achievement, but sleepless nights and missed social events. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't just lost her job, she'd lost her purpose. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of professional purgatory. Alina's attempts to reach out to former colleagues were met with polite deflections or outright silence. Industry friends, once eager to collaborate, suddenly found their schedules mysteriously full whenever she suggested meeting. The isolation gnawed at her, transforming her spacious apartment into a prison of solitude. In desperation, she began attending tech meetups and networking events, hoping to rebuild her professional network. But each attempt felt like running headfirst into an invisible wall. At one event, she overheard two developers discussing her termination, their voices carrying across the crowded room. "Yeah, heard she got canned for nepotism," one said, popping a cocktail shrimp into his mouth. "Guess those fancy algorithms weren't so original after all." The words struck deeper than any formal accusation ever could. Alina excused herself to the restroom, where she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her appeared hollow-eyed and defeated, a far cry from the confident engineer who had once commanded rooms full of senior executives. Her savings dwindled alarmingly fast. Without her company-provided health insurance, medical bills from a minor procedure began piling up. The sleek laptop she'd purchased just months before her termination now seemed like an extravagant mistake. Even her beloved morning coffee routine became a luxury she debated daily. Each rejection letter or ignored application added another brick to the wall separating her from her former life. Some companies cited her recent termination as a concern, others simply ghosted her after initial interviews. The few offers that did come through were for positions well below her expertise level, with salaries that barely covered her basic expenses. Alina's mental health began to deteriorate. Nights stretched into sleepless vigils, punctuated by panic attacks that left her gasping for air in the darkness. She started keeping a journal, documenting each day's struggles in meticulous detail, perhaps hoping that putting pen to paper could somehow make sense of the chaos consuming her life. Ironically, it was during one of these dark nights that clarity struck. Flipping through old notebooks, she stumbled upon early sketches of what would become her most significant contribution to the company, the core technology that powered their entire infrastructure. As she traced the lines of code with her finger, a spark of defiance ignited within her. This wasn't just about getting another job, this was about reclaiming her legacy. The CEO paced his office, the city skyline providing a silent witness to his growing unease. 3 weeks had passed since Alina's termination, and something felt off. Reports from various departments hinted at underlying issues he couldn't quite grasp. The new lead developer had raised concerns about system stability, while customer support noted an unusual spike in technical difficulties. Each problem seemed isolated, yet they shared a common thread, areas where Alina's expertise had once been crucial. His assistant knocked softly before entering, holding a tablet displaying the latest quarterly projections. "Sir, we need to address the performance metrics. Several key systems are showing signs of degradation." Her voice carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering bad news to a superior. The CEO waved her away, already distracted by another pressing matter. He had just received an email from their legal department, flagging potential intellectual property concerns regarding their core technology stack. The timing couldn't be worse. They were preparing for a major round of funding, and investors were asking increasingly detailed questions about their technological foundations. Late that night, unable to shake his growing apprehension, the CEO found himself in the server room. Rows of blinking lights cast eerie shadows on the walls as he examined the racks of equipment. Something about the setup felt different, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. He pulled up the system architecture diagrams on his tablet, comparing them to the physical layout before him. That's when it hit him, the subtle elegance of the design, the seamless integration of components that should have been incompatible. These weren't just standard configurations, they bore the unmistakable mark of genius engineering. His mind flashed back to numerous meetings where Alina had presented updates on system improvements, her explanations always slightly vague when pressed for technical details. Returning to his office, the CEO began digging through old project files, searching for documentation on their core technology. What he found, or rather what he didn't find, sent a chill down his spine. There were no comprehensive design documents, no patent filings detailing the fundamental architecture. Just a series of incremental updates, each signed off by Alina. His research led him down a rabbit hole of technical forums and industry publications. Piece by piece, a disturbing picture emerged. Articles Alina had authored years before joining the company discussed theoretical approaches remarkably similar to their current system architecture. Conference presentations she'd given contained blueprints that matched their proprietary technology almost exactly. The CEO's unease transformed into full-blown panic as he cross-referenced dates and development timelines. Their core technology hadn't been developed in-house. It had been implemented by Alina, who had brought her own innovations to the company. Innovations that, according to the fine print of her employment contract, might still legally belong to her. The implications were staggering. Every product they sold, every service they provided, relied on technology that might not actually belong to them. The funding round they were counting on could evaporate overnight if investors discovered the truth. Worse still, competitors could challenge their market position if word got out about the questionable origins of their technology. Pacing his office, the CEO realized he had made a catastrophic mistake. In his haste to address perceived nepotism, he had terminated the very person who held the keys to their company's survival. The woman he had accused of riding on family connections had actually been the architect of their success, and potentially still held legal ownership of the foundation upon which their entire business rested. He sank into his chair, staring at the glowing city beyond his window. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was far more complex and dangerous than he had imagined. Somewhere out there, Alina was living with the consequences of his rash decision. And now, he needed to find her, not just to rectify a terrible wrong, but to save the company he had built. Across town, Alina sat in her dimly lit apartment, staring at her laptop screen. The past weeks had been a blur of legal consultations and document reviews. What she had initially dismissed as coincidence had revealed itself to be a startling truth. She legally owned the core technology that powered her former company's entire operation. The algorithm she had developed in graduate school, refined during countless late nights, and integrated into the company's systems belonged to her, protected by carefully worded clauses in her original employment contract. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she drafted what would be her first communication with the company since her termination. The weight of the situation pressed down on her. She held the power to disrupt millions in revenue, affect hundreds of employees, and potentially destroy the company that had wrongfully dismissed her. Yet, paradoxically, she also understood the human cost of such actions. Many of her former colleagues had families to support, careers tied to the company's success. Memories of collaborative projects and successful launches fought against the pain of her dismissal. She remembered mentoring junior developers, celebrating milestones with her team, and contributing to products that genuinely helped customers. These recollections clashed with the harsh reality of her termination, creating an emotional whirlwind that made clear decisions difficult. The CEO's public statements about innovation and integrity rang hollow now, yet she couldn't ignore the fact that many employees truly believed in the company's mission. Her revenge would hurt not just the executives who had wronged her, but also the receptionist who always greeted her warmly, the IT staff who had supported her late-night deployments, and the marketing team who had helped showcase her work. Alina's cursor blinked mockingly on the draft email. Should she negotiate? Demand compensation? File a lawsuit? Or could she find a way to reconcile her desire for justice with the potential collateral damage? Each option came with its own set of consequences, both professional and personal. The media attention alone could be overwhelming, and the industry gossip mill would undoubtedly spin the story into something unrecognizable. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The complexity of modern corporate structures meant that punishing the company for its mistakes would inevitably affect innocent people. Yet doing nothing felt like accepting their verdict about her character and abilities. The ethical tightrope she now walked demanded careful consideration of both her rights and responsibilities. Her phone buzzed with notifications, messages from concerned friends, industry contacts checking in, and even a few anonymous tips about stock fluctuations at her former company. Each ping represented another thread in the complicated web she now navigated. The decision before her wasn't just about righting a wrong, it was about defining who she wanted to be in the aftermath of betrayal. As dawn approached, Alina saved her draft and closed her laptop. The city outside her window began to stir, oblivious to the technological and ethical storm brewing in her modest apartment. She knew she couldn't rush this decision. The ramifications would ripple through lives and careers far beyond her own. For now, she would let the possibilities settle, allowing both her anger and her compassion to find their proper balance before making her next move. The city stirred awake, its streets filling with the morning rush of commuters unaware of the technological drama unfolding above them. Alina stood at her kitchen window, watching the patterns of movement below while her mind grappled with the monumental decision ahead. The clock ticked relentlessly forward, each second amplifying the pressure of her choice. Her former company's fate hung precariously in the balance, intertwined with her own future in ways neither party could have anticipated. Across town, the CEO faced his own brand of sleepless anxiety. The magnitude of his mistake grew clearer with each passing hour, manifesting in the form of urgent emails and panicked status updates from department heads. His executive team convened emergency meetings, their faces reflecting varying degrees of concern and confusion. The company's carefully constructed facade of technological superiority threatened to crumble, revealing the foundational truth they had overlooked in their haste to address nepotism. Meanwhile, the technology itself continued its silent operation, powering transactions, communications, and processes worldwide. Servers hummed with activity, oblivious to the legal and ethical quagmire surrounding their very existence. Customers went about their daily routines, completely unaware that the services they depended on existed in a precarious state of limbo between rightful ownership and corporate necessity. Industry insiders began sniffing around the edges of the situation, their antennae tuned to the subtle shifts in company behavior and market positioning. Rumors spread like digital wildfire through professional networks and chat rooms, each iteration adding layers of speculation and exaggeration. Recruiters who had previously ignored Alina's applications now approached her with renewed interest, sensing opportunity in the unfolding drama. Legal experts weighed in on technology blogs and business publications, dissecting the implications of employee-owned intellectual property within corporate structures. The case quickly evolved beyond a simple termination dispute, becoming a textbook example of how modern businesses navigate the complex intersection of innovation, ownership, and ethics. Law schools added it to their discussion topics, while startup founders debated the merits of stringent intellectual property clauses in employment contracts. Back in her apartment, Alina watched these developments unfold with a mixture of fascination and dread. Each article, each expert opinion, each speculative tweet added another layer of complexity to her decision-making process. The technology she had created, nurtured through sleepless nights and fueled by pure passion, had grown beyond her original vision, becoming an integral part of global infrastructure. Its future now depended on choices that would affect not just her former company and its employees, but potentially thousands of users and clients worldwide. The CEO's attempts to contact her remained unanswered, his emails sitting unread in her inbox. She knew that each passing day increased the pressure on both sides, creating a delicate dance of power and vulnerability. Yet she resisted the urge to respond immediately, understanding that time itself had become a crucial element in this high-stakes negotiation. The longer she waited, the more clearly the true value of her contribution would become apparent to those who had once dismissed it as mere nepotistic advantage. As mid-morning approached, Alina finally opened her laptop again. The blank document stared back at her, representing both an opportunity and a burden. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to begin crafting a response that would set in motion a chain of events affecting countless lives. Outside her window, the city continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the technological and ethical reckoning about to unfold. Alina took a deep breath and began typing. Her words were measured, clear, and deliberate. She didn't want vengeance, she wanted justice, not just for herself, but for the integrity of innovation itself. The email she drafted wasn't accusatory or bitter. It was an invitation to negotiate, a chance for both sides to come together and resolve the situation with fairness and respect. I hope this message finds you well. Over the past weeks, I've had time to reflect on recent events and consider their implications, not only for myself, but for the company, its employees, and the countless people who rely on the technology we've built together. As you may now realize, the core architecture underpinning our systems is rooted in work I developed prior to joining the company. This fact was protected by clauses in my original employment contract, which explicitly retained certain intellectual property rights. While I never intended to use these protections as leverage, it has become clear that addressing this oversight is necessary. Rather than pursuing legal action or public disclosure, both of which would have far-reaching consequences, I propose we find a mutually beneficial solution. My goal is not to punish, but to ensure that the technology continues to thrive while being properly acknowledged and compensated. Please let me know if you're open to discussing terms that honor the contributions of all parties involved. I believe there's a way forward that preserves the company's future and recognizes the value of what I brought to it. Sincerely, Alina. She hit send, her heart pounding. It felt like releasing a tightly wound spring, letting go of anger and uncertainty and replacing them with purpose. For the first time since her termination, she felt in control, not of others, but of her own choices. The CEO received the email within minutes. His hands trembled as he read it, relief washing over him at the absence of hostility. He immediately called an emergency meeting with his executive team, sharing the contents of the email and outlining the gravity of the situation. They agreed. Alina held all the cards, and they needed her cooperation to avoid disaster. Within hours, Alina's phone buzzed. It was a direct call from the CEO himself. "Alina," he said, his voice heavy with sincerity, "thank you for reaching out. I can't begin to express how sorry I am for everything that's happened. You're absolutely right, we need to address this properly. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss next steps?" Alina hesitated for just a moment before replying, "Yes, tomorrow works." The following day, Alina walked into a private conference room at a neutral location, a quiet cafe near her apartment. The CEO arrived shortly after, looking every bit as worn down as she'd felt during her darkest days. Gone was the confident leader who had accused her of nepotism. In his place was a man humbled by the weight of his mistakes. "I owe you more than an apology," he began, sitting across from her. "What I did was reckless, unfair, and completely misguided. Firing you wasn't just wrong, it endangered the very foundation of this company. And worse, it dismissed your incredible contributions." Alina nodded, appreciating his candor. "Let's focus on solutions," she said. "I don't want to see the company fail, nor do I want anyone else to suffer because of decisions made in haste. But I also need to protect my work and ensure it's valued appropriately." Over the course of several hours, they hammered out an agreement. Alina would grant the company a perpetual license to use her core technology in exchange for a substantial financial settlement and formal recognition of her role as the architect behind their success. Additionally, the company committed to establishing a mentorship program aimed at supporting women and underrepresented groups in tech, a cause close to Alina's heart. In return, Alina agreed to consult with the company during a transitional period, ensuring a smooth handover of responsibilities. She also requested, and received, a public statement acknowledging her contributions and apologizing for the circumstances surrounding her termination. Weeks later, the announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. Headlines praised Alina's professionalism and vision, while the company's transparency earned it renewed trust among investors and customers. Employees who had once whispered about nepotism now spoke openly about Alina's brilliance and leadership, grateful for her willingness to prioritize the greater good. For Alina, the resolution marked a new beginning. With the resources from the settlement, she founded her own research lab, focusing on cutting-edge technologies designed to empower marginalized communities. Her story became a beacon of hope for innovators everywhere, a testament to resilience, integrity, and the power of choosing grace over grudges. One evening, as she stood in her new office overlooking the city skyline, Alina reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined her. Instead, she carried the lessons learned, that true strength lies not in holding power over others, but in using it to uplift, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but rather moving forward with wisdom, and that sometimes, the most satisfying victories are those where everyone wins. Her phone buzzed with a notification, a message from a former colleague thanking her for paving the way for change within the company. Alina smiled, tucking the device back into her pocket. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a life touched by the ripple effect of her decision. And for the first time in months, Alina felt truly free.